Let's take a look at DSMA 5, squares and square roots. So this is just my little humor. I saw this picture and just loved it for a square root. Okay, so let's look at exponents first. So if we have 3 squared, the 3 is what we call the base, and then the 2 is the exponent. And what this means is we're going to multiply 3 times 3. So we're going to have 2 3s, and that would give us 9. If we had 4 raised to the third power, we're going to have 3 4s, right? 4 times 4 times 4, and that would give us 64. Now, of course, you can put these in your calculator as well. All right, so this problem has p equal to k squared when k is equal to 4. So all we're going to do is substitute 4 in for k. Now, I always use parentheses. I use a lot of parentheses. But the thing is, if this had been a negative number, we would have to use the parentheses. And so I just always use the parentheses. But of course, then that would give 4 times 4 would give me 16. And that's it. That's the answer. Great. So I wanted to show you these two because the parentheses really matter. Now you'll notice there are parentheses on your Casio. They're right above, I think it's the 8 and 9. And so you actually can put this in your Casio looking just like this. But when we have parentheses like this, that means that both the negative and the 8 are raised to the second power. So we would have negative 8 times negative 8, which would actually give us a positive 64. Okay, so the parentheses tell us that the negative is raised to the power as well. The problem with this one is the 10 is raised to the second power, but the negative is not. Okay, so this is technically the same as negative 1 times 10 squared. And so that would be negative 1 times 100, which would give me negative 100. So you have to be very careful about whether the negative is raised to the power or not raised. If there's no parentheses, it is not raised to the power. If there's parentheses, then it is raised. All right, so this is negative 1/4 squared. Because of the parentheses, we know that this is going to be negative 1/4 times negative 1/4. The negative is raised to the power as well, which gives us a positive number. And then for multiplying fractions, we have 1 times 1 and 4 times 4. So we end up with 1/16. And again, we can put this in the calculator as well. On the Casio, there's a button that looks like this. That is your fraction button. And so if you hit that, it's going to look just like what you have in My Stat Lab, and you're able to put the negative 1 in the numerator on top and the 4 on the bottom. And you can actually make it just like we have there. You could put the negative out front, do parentheses. You have a 1, and a 4 down here, and raise it to the second power. Okay, so a little more substitution. We have y equal p squared over x. Well, it tells me that p is equal to negative 2. Make sure you use parentheses always when you're substituting in. And then x is negative 12. So this is going to give me, let's see, negative 2 times negative 2 gives me a positive 4. On the bottom, I have negative 12. So I know this is going to be a negative number, right? Because I have a positive over a negative. And then we can simplify this. 4 goes into both the numerator and the denominator. So I would end up with 1/3. So this is going to be negative 1/3. Okay, let's take a look at another one that we're substituting. So we have Q equals R, all times P minus 5 raised to the second power. So they tell me that R is negative 0.98. P is 3.3 minus 5 all squared. So let's take a look at this calculator. I know the calculator looks different than yours, but it's the same keyboard. It really is the Casio 115. So your negative key is sitting here. Sometimes it matters. Some calculators are picky. So if it's a negative, like the negative in front here, you're going to use that key that looks like a hyphen inside parentheses. That's the negative. Your parentheses are right here above the 9. Let me switch colors so you can see. So right above the 9, you have your parentheses. Well, I thought I switched colors. And then you type 3.3. You've got your subtraction key here and your parentheses. And then up here you have 2 keys. This one is the x, literally x squared. So for this one, you could use that. But if it had been raised to the 4th power or the 5th power, then you use that key that looks like this. It's going to end up looking just like it does in my stat lab. So at that point, you hit your equal sign, and we get negative 2.8322. But they want 2 decimals, so that means I'm going to round at the 3. I've got to look at the 2, and that would give me negative 2.83. Okay, so here's our perfect square roots. So if I take the square root of 9, I want to know a number that I can multiply times itself and get back to 9. So that would be 3 times 3 under the square root, right? 9 is 3 times 3, and so that would get me back to 3. The square root of 25. I would need a number that I can multiply times itself to get to 25, and so that would be 5. Now, of course, we are going to be able to use our calculator for this, but I just wanted to show you some of those common and show you what the square root looks like. Now, luckily in statistics, most of the work's going to be done in StatCrunch, and we're not going to have to mess so much with these square roots, but occasionally we do, so we just want to get used to them. All right, so they're asking me for the square root of 169. So this is not a common perfect square that we know. I know it because I like the number 13, and this is 13 times 13. But let's go ahead and look at our calculator. So the square root key is right here. If you hit that square root key, it's going to give you the square root with a little box underneath. You are able to type the 169 in there. If you need to come out from under the square root, you can hit your arrow key right here, and that would bring you back out. For this one, you can just hit equal, and you get 13. All right, so you can put the square root of 0 in your calculator if you want, but it's just 0, right? 0 times 0 gives you 0. Now, sometimes we can't find a square root. The square root of negative 4, if you type that into your calculator, you're going to get a math error because there is no real number that could give us negative 4. So if we're trying to multiply a number times itself and get negative 4, there's no way to do it. If I take negative 2 times negative 2, I'm going to get positive 4. So that's not going to work. And so we call this an imaginary number. It's not a real number. And so when you get that error, you're going to go ahead and say the square root is not a real number. If you go take college algebra, you would find out that this is actually 2i, which is an imaginary number. We're not going to go into that in this class, but you wouldn't have a cell phone if we didn't have imaginary numbers. We use them in electrical engineering. Okay, so but our whole point is if you put negative 4 under square root, or if you put any number under square root and you get this math error, that means that the square root is not a real number. Okay, so this asks us to evaluate the square root. Again, we're going to use our Casio, but let me show you here. We need to make sure we're going to hit the square root key. So that's going to give me a square root. It's going to give me a box here, so I can put 20 in. Now you have to come out from under that square root. So use your right arrow key over here, and that will take you out from under the square root. Then you can hit the square root k again. You don't have to put a multiplication. It's assumed that it's multiplication. Then you get a box again, you hit the 5, hit equal, and the answer is 10. The reason it's 10 is there's lots of rules with square roots. Again, we're not going to worry about those. If you go take college algebra, you get to worry about those. But what would happen is you would multiply the 20 times the 5 under the radical. That would give you the square root of 100. And of course, the square root of 100 is 10. This problem is asking us for the square root of a fraction. So again, you're going to hit that square root key right here. Once you hit that, you'll get a box, right? Then you're going to hit the fraction key that's right next to it. Once you do that, you're actually literally going to get boxes for the fraction. So you can put in the 1, put in the 49, hit equal, and you would get 1 over 7. There's all kinds of rules for square roots where you can take the square root of 1, that gives you 1, the square root of 49, that gives you 7, but of course you leave it in the denominator. We're going to let our calculator help us.